Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel after a while, and that is because I've been recording a Next.js course which I just released the other day. You can check it out. So today we're going to be building this Pomodoro timer, and it is a productivity tool. So we have the Pomodoro, which is 25 minutes. We have the short break, which is 5 minutes. We have the long break, which is 15 minutes. Now when you click on the start button right here, it's going to start this counter, which is going to start diminishing this circle slowly by slowly, as you can see right here. And then when you get to a certain point, the color is going to change. And then when you get to less than 20%, the color is also going to change, just to give you some visual notification that the timer is about to run out. And then when the timer runs out, it is going to automatically switch into the next mode, depending on where you currently are. Now, if you don't like the times here, you can go into the settings right here and you can change up the timers for you. So if you want, for example, to go into 45 minutes for the Pomodoro and 1 minute for the short break, and then let's say 20 minutes for the long break, you can save that and then see this. Now the Pomodoro is 45 minutes, the short break is 1 minute, and the long break is 20 minutes. So let's go ahead and begin building this out. And I'm going to open up my command prompt right here, and then I'm going to cd into my desktop. And then inside my desktop, I have another folder that is called projects. And then inside projects, I'm going to say pnpx create next app. And I'm going to use a template repository that I created, and it contains shadcn prettier, which helps us to format Tailwind CSS classes. And then it also has Tailwind CSS installed. So let's use the template. So I'm going to say -- example, and then pass in the string, or rather pass in the link to the repository. So https://github.com/my username, and you can have this in small letters, it's still okay. So my username, and then the repository is called next15-starter. And then before you execute this, let's give it a name. So I'm going to call it Pomodoro-timer. And then I'm going to let this execute. And then once it finishes, we're going to take a look at this template, and then we're going to begin building our application. So once it finishes running, you can see that it creates a folder for us that is called Pomodoro timer, which is where our Next.js application lives. So I can go ahead and say code Pomodoro timer, Pomodoro-timer, and this is going to open up an instance of VS Code into this folder, as you can see right here. So I can safely close this, close it, and there we go. So this is our application. And like I said, we used a template which I created when Next.js updated to version 15. So some of these files, such as the ESLint RC.json, I don't think they currently exist with 15.2, but as it is currently, our application is going to work, because what happens in the ESLint JSON file is basically this. And now you'll notice that this is just a bit different from how the ESLint JSON file looks like when you create a Next.js application from scratch, because I've added in the next/bubble. Now the reason why I added this in is because it was giving me some compilation errors when I was building out my application, and adding this inside the extends fixed it. So now let's go ahead and do this. Ctrl J to open up our terminal, and then I can go ahead and say pnpm dev, which is going to open up our dev server on localhost 3000. Now as this is opening up, I want to mention something. Inside here we have the Prettier RC file, and this file just uses the Prettier plugin Tailwind CSS as a plugin, which helps us to format Tailwind CSS classes. Now if you check the package.json file, which is right here, you will notice that we have the Prettier plugin Tailwind CSS right there. So you have to install it. But once again, if you use the template, then this is already installed for you. And the other thing that I want to mention is Lucid React right here, because I've already initialized shadcn in our application right here. So Lucid React is already installed. And the reason why we have Lucid React installed is because if you check the components.json file, the style that I used for shadcn is called New York. Now, if you use the default style, then you'll have Radix UI instead of Lucid React. So just take note of that. And all this, you can get them on the documentation website. So if you want to learn about shadcn, simply Google shadcn if you want to learn about the prettier plugin tailoring CSS, simply Google prettier plugin tailoring CSS. Now let's go ahead and open up our browser right here on localhost 3000, and let's see what we have as our default application, because I also changed it up just a bit. And there we go. So this is our template, and by this you can tell all I did was just change up the homepage and add in a bit of explanation about why I created this template. And if you want to learn about Shadcyan, this is the link right here. If you want the prettier plugin for tailoring CSS, this is the link right here, and then it gives some other explanation as well. So as always, let's go ahead into our app folder and into our page.js, and then we can begin to build our application. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this entire div all the way to the bottom. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a div with a class name equals to, because I want to build out the UI first. So it's going to have a class of flex, min, height, screen. I can type it, and then flex column, then item dash center. Oh my god, center, and then justify dash center, and then a bg of hashtag 1e 1e 2e, and then it's going to have text white. And then inside this div we're going to have an h1 of class names margin bottom of 6 and text dash 2xl and font dash semi bold, and then on large screens the text is going to be 4xl, and then this h1 is simply going to say Pomodoro, so Pomodoro. Now we can go ahead and save that, and this is what we're going to have on the screen once it reloads. There we go. So we simply have our Pomodoro. Now because it's going to be easy, I'm going to place this to the right so that I can place my code editor to the left, and then we can build side by side. So below this h1 we're going to have another div with class names of flex, items as center, space on the y-axis, or sorry, on the x-axis of 4, and then rounded dash full. And I need to spell this correctly, so center. And then we're going to have a bg here of hashtag 2c2c3b, and then we're going to have a padding all round of 2, padding all round of 2, so that inside this div we're going to create our modes toggle, so simply the Pomodoro, short break, and the long break. So let's go ahead and actually do that right away because it's very simple. So we can create an array here called modes. So const modes is equal to Pomodoro, and then the next one is going to be short break, and then long break. And then inside this div now we can map over our modes. So you can say modes.map because it is now an array, and then we're going to say that for every mode that we're going to get back, which is going to be one of these three, so we're going to say that we're going to return a button here, a button with the key equals to the mode, and then on click we're going to have an on click function, but for now I can't type. For now it's simply just going to remain empty. Let's just have it as empty. It should be okay working like that. Okay, it gives an error, so let me pass in an empty string. And then this button is going to have a bit of class names here which are going to be dynamic. Now because we have not yet added our state values, let's not add in the class names as of now. Let's just have it as an empty string, and then inside the button the text for the button is simply going to say the mode. Now if I save that, then we should be able to see something on the screen, and we get an issue here that says on click event string type. We can ignore that for now, but what we need to do now is, because we're using on click, then we need to transform this into a client component by saying use client on the top. Now in order to go ahead and create the dynamic part of the class names here, let's go ahead and add in our state values. And so we're going to have quite a number of state values, so I'm just going to create all of them right now because a lot of our UI depends on the state values. So we're going to say this. I'm going to say const active mode and set active mode is equal to use state, and you can just say enter when you say this drop down so that you can import it automatically from React, and by default this is going to say Pomodoro. Now this is going to be the default mode, so when we load up the application this should be highlighted, and this is actually the state value that the class names here depend on. So let's go ahead and create the rest of them. So const time left and set time left, which should be self-explanatory, and this one is going to say 25 times 60. And so the reason why we have it multiplied by 60 right here is because we want to convert the minutes into seconds, because JavaScript evaluates time in seconds, so that we can subtract 1 second every time, and then it can tick down the timer. And then the next one you need is the is running. So const is running and set is running is equal to useState, and by default is going to be false. And then const show settings, which is going to be our settings toggle, and set show settings is equal to useState, and once again by default it is going to be false. And then we're going to have const durations and set durations. This is going to be equal to useState, and by default it's going to be an object. And so inside this object we're going to have the Pomodoro, what am I typing? Pomodoro, which is going to be 25 by 60 to convert it into seconds. And then we're going to have the short break, which is going to be 5 times 60. And then we're going to have the long break as well, which is going to be 15 multiplied by 60. And then the reason why I've not placed this inside strings is because if I do, then I have Prettier installed and it's simply just going to format it so that it doesn't have strings. So this is okay because it's one word and this is two words, so you can place it inside strings. Now I can save that and our app should still have this error, but now we can go ahead and fix it. And the way we fix it is by passing in an inline function here, and I'm going to say set active mode into the mode that we are currently on, so that when we click on this it's going to toggle the mode. And then for the class names here, we can go ahead and pass in our brackets and then our backticks, and then we can give in some classes here. So it's going to have classes of rounded dash full, padding on the x of 4, padding on the y of 2, text dash small, font dash medium, and then transition, and then on large screen the text is going to be large. And then now we're going to pass in our $ curly brackets, and inside here we want to check whether the active mode is equal to the current mode that we're on. Now you can, from our state values, you can see that the active mode can either be Pomodoro or the short break or the long break. And the reason that we know that is because of this function right here. We are saying that whenever we click on either of these buttons, then the mode should change into whatever button that we click on, which is also going to change the active mode. So when the active mode matches the mode, which means that, for example, if we click on the Pomodoro, then we want to have some class names to apply. So what we're going to do is this: we're going to add a question mark here and say that if it is true, then the background for that button should be, and it is hashtag ff6b6b, and then text dash black. And then if it is not true, then we're going to have text gray dash 400, and then on hover we're going to have text dash white. Now we can go ahead and save that, and now this should update. And there we go. So our Pomodoro is now coming together, looking a bit nicer. So next, let's go ahead and create our circle, which is going to be our kind of countdown timer. So we're going to go below this div, and then what we're going to do is create another div, and this div is going to have a couple of class names. So it's going to have a class name here of relative. So we're going to say this is relative, margin top of 12, flex, items center, justify center, and then on large screens we're going to give it a margin top of 20, and then on large screens we're going to scale it up to 125 so that it looks a bit bigger. And if you were to take a look at this on a larger screens, you'll notice that it also looks just a bit bigger, and it looks a bit smaller just to scale it down for mobile screens. And so inside this div, what we're going to do is we're going to create an SVG, and then this SVG is going to have a width of 260 and a height of 260, and then we're going to create its view box here. We're going to say 0 space 0 and then 100 100, and then inside this SVG we're going to create our first circle. So a circle here, it is self-closing, and then we're going to give it some width here on the x-axis of 50, and then on the y-axis of 50 as well, and then a radius here is going to be 45, and then the stroke, so the color of the circle, is going to be hashtag 2C 2C 3B, and then we're going to say that the stroke width, the width of the stroke is going to be 6, and then the fill here, the fill is going to be, I can't type, is going to be, oh my god, okay, none. The fill is going to be none. So we can save that, and then let's see what we're going to have on the screen. And there we go. So this is our circle, and right below this we're going to create our second circle. So we're going to create a circle here. Once again, it is self-closing, and spell it correctly. And then on the x-axis is going to be 50, so cx is going to be 50. On the y-axis, once again, is going to be 50, so that it is exactly the same as this. And then the radius is going to be 45, and then the stroke here, oops, the stroke is going to be a certain color which you don't yet have, and then the stroke width is also going to be 6, like so, so that when it is counting down, it's going to leave this faint outline to show you that this is the time that has passed. And then the fill is going to be none. Now there are other properties that we're going to be adding inside here, and the properties are the stroke dash array, so dash array, and this is going to be 283, and this I just tested it out to see how the best that it would look. And then the stroke dash offset is also going to be 283, and then the stroke dash offset is going to be 283, so 283 multiplied by, and then our parentheses, 1 minus progress. Now where is progress coming from? We are going to get it. So what you can do is just take this on the next line, and then this on the next line, and then disable this so that you don't get any errors. And then below the stroke dash offset, we're going to say the stroke line cap. So the stroke line cap here is going to be round, meaning when it is counting down, we want the end of it to be rounded. And then once we have that, we're going to be adding a bit more attributes to the circle, but these attributes are coming from Framer Motion, which is the motion library, or rather the animation library that we're going to be using. So since we have not yet installed Framer Motion, then let's just go ahead and save that, and we're going to add in the properties later once we have installed it. So it has an issue here, so let's disable this also. Okay, so for the stroke color here, we're going to create a function which is going to detect the current position of the stroke, and then if it's like more than 50%, it's going to show a certain color, and then if it is less than 50, it's going to show another color, and then if it is less than 20, another color. So we're going to be calling a function inside here. So because we have not yet created it, and this is stroke, I missed the R, so because we have not yet created that function, we can just leave it empty. And if you want to see how it works, if you have red inside here, then this should now turn to red, I mean the outer line color. So let's just leave it as empty for now. And then what we need to do is below the SVG, we're going to go ahead and create a div here with a class name of absolute, and then text dash 5XL, and then font dash bold. And then inside here, we're going to show our time. So for now, you can just say 25 minutes, like so. So 25 full colon, like so. Now we're going to go below this div right here. And then below this div, we're going to have a button. So we're going to have a button. And did we install the TsbSankara button? Components, we don't have the TsbSankara button. So let's just continue. So the button here is going to have an on click. And the on click is going to be calling an inline function that is going to say set is running to the opposite of is running. So basically our state value on top. So is running is either true or false. So we are saying that if it is true, then set it to false. And if it is false, then set it to true. And that is going to be our start stop button. So this button is going to have some class names here. So class name is equal to margin top of 8, rounded dash full, bg dash, and it's going to be a hashtag ff6b6b, and then padding on the x is going to be 2, padding on the y is going to be padding on the Y is going to be 2, padding on the X is going to be 6, and then we're going to say font dash semi bold, and then text dash, oh my god, I can't type, so text dash black. On large screens the margin top is going to be 20, and then on large screens we're going to scale it up once again to 125. Now I do realize that I can scale them up just using the, what am I typing inside here? Okay, so I was saying that I do realize that I can scale up the buttons just using the font size. Where's the font size inside here? I didn't even give it a font size, but I opted to do it as a scale because I just thought that it looks a bit better in my opinion. But once again, this is just my opinion and I might be wrong. So inside this button, what we're going to do is we're going to check for whether is running is true. So if is running is true, then the text that you want to display on the button is going to say pause. And then if it is false, then we're going to say start. And then we can go ahead and save that, and let's see what we have on the screen. So it should have our button, and there we go. Now below the button we need to go ahead and create a component here that is called dialog. Now dialog is going to be coming from TsbSankara, so let's go ahead and install this component. So Ctrl J to open up a terminal. You can add a second terminal right here, and then you can say pnpx TsbSankara add dialog, and then we can go ahead and install that. And then as it is installing, we can build out this component. So the dialog here is going to have an open prop here, and the open prop is going to be equal to show settings, which is one of our state values. And then on open change is going to call set show settings. So basically it creates a toggle. And then inside the dialog we're going to have the dialog trigger, which is going to be the button that we click on to open up the dialog. And inside the dialog trigger we're going to give it an as child prop so that its properties can go into the button. And then for the as child we're going to give this also a class name, and we're going to say margin top of 4, and then on large screens margin top of 10. And then inside here we're going to go ahead and add in a button from TsbSankara, which I do realize we should have installed. So let this finish installing, and then we can also install the button, but we can continue to build it out nevertheless. So this button is going to have a class name here, and it's going to say bg transparent, and then on hover we're going to say bg dash hashtag 2c2c3b, and then on large screens we're going to scale it up to 150 so that it is a larger button, because this is our settings icon. So inside the button you can just render settings icon, and you should have access to Lucid React, which is where the icon is coming from, and I didn't auto import it. So right here just say Control spacebar and enter to auto import it from Lucid React, and there we go. So you can import this from Lucid React, and you should have access to this if you clone the repository or if you install TsbSankara using the New York style. So right on the bottom you have the settings icon, and then below the dialog trigger we now want to go ahead and create the dialog content. So dialog content, and you know what, I just noticed that I've also not imported this. So right on the dialog, Control spacebar, and oh, this has not finished yet. Okay, let's wait for this to finish. Okay, so this is finished, so let's go ahead and start auto importing this. So right here, Control spacebar, and then make sure that you import the one that is coming from components UI dialog, because this is the one that you have in your components folder right here that has been created. So once again on the dialog trigger, Control spacebar, and then enter. And then on the button we don't yet have the button, so let's go into the dialog content, Control spacebar, and once again make sure that you import the one that is coming from components UI dialog. Now inside the dialog content we're going to give this a class name here, and this is going to say rounded dash large, and then it's going to have a border, and the border is going to be of a hashtag. Let me see the color, so 41415E, and then the background here is going to be hashtag 2c2c3b, and this should be hashtag not at, and then we're going to have a padding all round of 6, and then text dash white. Now the dialog here is going to be the settings model that pops up, so once we finish building this out we are going to be able to test it out. So inside the dialog content, and you know what, let's Ctrl J to open up our terminal, and then let's also install the button here, and we need to also install the label because of our inputs, and then the input because of our inputs. So let's install the button, label, and input as well. And then as we continue to build this out, inside the dialog content, we're going to have a dialog title. So dialog title, once again from components UI dialog, and the dialog title is going to have a class name here is equal to margin bottom of 4, and then text-xl and font-semi-bold. And the dialog title is simply just going to say settings. Now let's go ahead and actually save that, but before we save it, let's import the button right here. So on the button, right at the end, control spacebar, and then enter to import it. And then let's go ahead and save that so that we can test out whether our dialog is actually working. And then what you can do is just wait for this to load in. So there is our settings icon right there, and you can see that it has a nice little hover effect because of this right here. Now if we go ahead and click it, it should open up our dialog. So let's click it, and there we go. So that is our settings dialog. Now on large screens it looks like this, looks just a bit better, but I think we need to add some bit of padding on the x-axis. So what we can do is we can wrap the entire dialog here inside a div with padding on the x-axis of 6, and then save it, and this should push inwards, and it doesn't push inwards. So let's remove this div and this closing div, and then let's just work with it as it is. Let's just build out the UI. And so what we're going to do is right below the dialog title, we're going to render out a component that we're going to create that is called settings, and then we're going to close the dialog content, and then we're going to have that. But then right after the dialog content, or that after the dialog component, we're going to have an audio which is going to play when the Pomodoro timer finishes. So inside here, what we can just do is we can just render out the audio element. And then for the audio element, we're going to be using the use ref hook. So the ref here is going to be equal to the audio ref, which we're going to create. And then the source is going to be equal to /alarm, I can't type today, .wav file. And then we're going to say preload is equal to auto, so that it preloads, and then it's just simply going to play the audio from this right here. So let's go ahead and create this audio ref before we forget. So right on top right, we can go below this, we can say const audio ref is equal to use ref, so the use ref hook, and then enter to auto import it right there. And then the use ref hook, we're going to initialize it to, what am I typing? We're going to initialize this to now, like so. And then before we save it and break our application, Control B to open up your sidebar, and then inside the components folder, but not inside the UI. So inside the components folder, just create a new file called settings.jsx, and then enter. And then inside here we can say export default function settings, like so. And then we can just return here a div that says settings, and then you can save that. And then back inside our page.js, we can go to the bottom right on the settings here, at the end of it, control spacebar, and then enter to import it from your components folder. Once again, make sure it is from your component settings. And then now we can save that, and you can test out our UI, and we should see settings right there. So everything is currently working as we expect it to work. So next, what we're going to do is we want to go ahead and add the functionality for this entire page before we can go into the settings. So let's go ahead and add the functionality bit by bit. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our countdown timer for this. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go below the modes right here, and below the modes we're going to say use effect. And then for the use effect, we need to import this on control spacebar and then enter to import it from React. And then we're going to have our callback function here with a dependency array called isRunning. So isRunning, so running. So basically we're saying that whenever the isRunning is changing, so this, whenever it changes, then we want the use effect to also change. And that basically means that when it is set to true, because when it is set to true, then we know that this is running. So inside the use effect, we're going to say this, we're going to say let interval, so create a variable here called interval, and then we're going to say if isRunning is true. So if isRunning, then the interval is equal to or that is going to be equal to set interval, which is a function. So set interval, which is a function that we're going to use to create our countdown timer. And then we're going to add a function here, and then we're going to say set time left into the previous value. And then we're going to say right here, add another bracket, and we're going to say that if the previous value is greater than 0, and if this is true, then we simply want to subtract 1 from it. So previous value minus 1. And then if it is not less than 0, then we simply want to return 0 so that we don't count into the negative. And then we can close that down. And then right here, we're going to say that we want this function to run every second, which is 1000 milliseconds. So the function for the set interval right there. And then once we do that, we're going to have an else statement here where we're going to say clear interval. So clear interval, and then we just want to clear the interval variable so that we don't have an infinitely running function. So once we do that, then we also need to clear up the use effect. So right below this, we're going to say return, and we're going to be returning clear interval. So clear interval, what am I typing? Clear interval, and then pass in the interval once again. So that should be okay. And let's go ahead and save that. So once we do that, then the next function that we're going to create is going to be another use effect. So use effect, add in our callback function. So add in the callback function right here. And then this is going to be dependent on the time left. So time left. And inside here, we're simply going to say this. We're going to say set time left. And then we're going to pass in durations. And then inside durations, we're going to pass in the active mode. And so what does this mean? Well, durations here is an array, and it is dependent on the current active mode, because the active mode can either be the Pomodoro or the short break or the long break. So what we're simply saying here is that we set the time to the duration that is in the active mode. So if the mode is Pomodoro, then set the timer to this. If the mode is the short break, to this, and long break, set the timer to this. Now, once we do that, then we're going to create another use effect. You can see we have quite a number of use effects, and this is going to be dependent on the time left. And actually, I've made a mistake somewhere. This is not the time left. This should be dependent on the active mode as well as the durations. So durations. And then what you need to do is after this, then you need to say set is running to false. So what this does basically is it resets the timer. So set the timer. Set the timer when the mode changes. So basically, when you change the mode, then the timer should reset and everything should look nice on the screen. And then now for the use effect right here, what we want to do is we want to switch the current mode that we are on once the timer runs out, so that you don't have to switch it manually. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that if the time left is equal to 0, then we're going to say audio ref dot current dot play, meaning play the current audio because the timer has run out. And then we're going to say set timeout. So set timeout, and then we're going to pass in our function here. Then we're going to say switch I can't spell today, so switch mode, like so. Now switch mode is going to run every second, and switch mode is a function that we don't yet have. So let's go ahead and create that function. So we're going to say const switch mode is equal to an arrow function, like so. And then we're going to say this, that we're going to say const current index is equal to the modes dot index of the active mode. So we want to get the active mode, and then we're going to say that the const next index is equal to the current index plus 1 modulus the modes.length. So modes.length, and this needs to be in parentheses so that it evaluates properly. And then once we do that, then we're going to say set active mode into the modes, and then pass in next index as an array. So basically check the current mode that we are on, and this should say set active mode. So check the current mode that we're on, and then if we're on the Pomodoro, then pass in the next index, which is the short break. And then if we're on the short break, then pass in the next index, which is the long break. Fantastic. Once we do that, let's go ahead and calculate our progress. So for the progress, we're going to say this: const total time is equal to the durations, and then pass in the active mode, like so, active mode. And then we're going to say const progress is equal to, pass in your brackets, and we're going to say time left divided by the total time, and then multiply this by 100, so that the progress is going to be a percentage. Fantastic. Now once we do that, we can go ahead and enable this part right here and this part. So we can enable those two parts, but then we still don't have the color. So before we save that, let's go ahead and create the color. So for the color, we're going to say this: we're going to create a function here. So const color is equal to an arrow function, and we're going to say that if the progress, which we have just gotten right here above, is greater than 50, then the color that we want to return is going to be hashtag ff6b6b, which is our pinkish color right there. And then if the progress is less than, or greater than 25, then the color that we want to return is going to be an OK LCH kind of color, and this is a new color standard from CSS. You can go ahead and read about it. And the value, the first value here is going to be 0.769, and the next one is going to be 0.188, and then 70.08. And then once the value is less than 25, then you simply want to go ahead and return another color which is similar to this. Let me copy that, paste it here, and then the values are going to be just a bit different, where we're going to say that this is going to be 0.505, and then 0.213, and then 27.518. And I just got this from just a bit of trial and error, really. Fantastic. So now that we have the color, then we can go ahead and pass in the color on the stroke here. So you can go ahead and pass in the color like so, and let's save it just to make sure that we don't have anything weird on the screen, because we've written quite a bit. And look at that. Fantastic. And I think this should be working. So if we press on oh, you know what, it's not working because we have not created the timer yet, or that we have not passed in the timer. So where we had coded the 25, where did we had code it? It was somewhere here. What I need to do is pass in the time left. The time left. And then now it should be 25, and then look at that. So you can see that there's an issue there because it is evaluating the time in what's it called, in seconds instead of minutes. So if I start that, then it counts down, right? So what we need to do is we need to format this time into a time that is readable by human beings, because who wants to do this kind of math anyway? So what we're going to do here is, instead of just rendering the state value, we're going to render a function that is called format time, and then pass in the time left. So let's go ahead and create this function. So right here on the bottom, we're going to go ahead and say this. We're going to say const format time is equal to, and we're going to pass in the seconds, and then we're going to say this: const minutes is equal to math.flow, and then we're going to pass in the seconds divided by 60, so that that returns it into minutes. And then we're going to say this, that const seconds is equal to seconds modulus 60, that we actually get the number of seconds remaining. And then what we're going to now return is, we're going to return a timer here, and we're going to pass in backticks so that we can add in our $ curly brackets. So we're going to say that we want to return the number of minutes, and then we're going to return the $ once again, the number of seconds. And if what they call this, I can't call this seconds because this is already seconds, so this needs to be, let's just call it that. And then we're going to say that the number of seconds here, if this is less than 10 and it evaluates to true, then we want to add a 0 before it, and then otherwise we just want to return nothing. And then finally we're now just going to render the seconds like so. So actually, let's remove these spaces because the timer shouldn't have the spaces, and that should be okay. So let's go ahead and save that, and now this time should be formatted properly. There we go. So 24 minutes and 51 seconds, and then you can start it, and it counts down Very, very nice. And on the short break, you can start this and it should also count down. And then on the long break, you can see that every time that we see that we are switching the mode, then the timer updates and it starts again. So looking very, very nice. So now the next thing that we need to do is we need to work on our animation here, which is going to make this count down. So therefore, what we're going to do is this: Control J to open up our terminal, and then we're going to say pnpm add framer-motion, which is our animation library. And then as that is installing, we can begin to use it. So right where we have our second circle, so this one right here, the way that we use framer-motion is we need to go ahead and use the element that is called motion from framer-motion. So we're going to say motion dot circle, and this is coming from framer-motion, so we need to actually import it once it finishes installing. And we have added in the stroke color, we've added in the dash array and dash offset. But then now, in order to animate this, we need to pass in some other properties here from framer-motion. So we're going to pass in the initial, meaning the initial animation, where does it start from? And this is coming from the stroke dash offset, and the stroke dash offset is 283. So basically it's starting from right here at the beginning. And then we're going to go ahead and say that we want to animate. And what do we want to animate? Well, we want to animate the stroke dash offset. Stroke dash offset. And this once again is 283. So 283, and this was all from testing, minus, passing the brackets, progress divided by 100, and then outside of this multiply this by 283. And then once you do that, then the transition that we want to have is going to be an ease transition, which is going to be linear, and then pass in the duration here of 1. So basically this transition should run every second, because we know that the timer is going to be running down every second. Now I think we should be able to save that, but we need to import motion. So right here, Control spacebar, and it's not giving me the value for motion. So let's go ahead and just import it manually. So right here we can say import motion from, oh my god, from framer-motion, like so. And then now we should be able to save that. And once it reloads, let's just manually reload it, because it's been having some issue to reload automatically. There we go. So that now let's use the short break, because the short break is a bit lesser on the minute, so we should be able to see it immediately. We have 2 issues. What's the issue? Okay, we don't have any issues, so I think that was just an error. So let's go ahead and say on the short break, let's say start, and we should be able to see this animating downwards. Let's just wait a moment. Okay, so the circle is not animating. Let me figure out why it is not doing that. So I've reloaded the application, and it was giving me that error that says this should be stroke dash array with a small letter. Let's try it out. Let's try it out. Let's just save that and then reload it. And see how it animated in. So I think now it should work. So let's say start, and you should be able to see it counting down. And I'm actually leaning closer. I think it's counting down, but this time is just too much. But you can see it right there. So let's try the short break here, and we should be able to see it. Let's see. And there we go. So you can see that now our circle is actually counting down depending on the current time. So just to show you how the colors are going to come in, I'm going to reduce this to 1 minute, the short break to 1 minute, so that you can just see. I'm just going to fast forward it over the 1 minute so that you can see how the color is going to change. So let's reload that, and then let's go to the short break. So short break, and then start that out, and then see you in a minute, because I'm going to fast forward this part. And now that we are less than 25%, now the color changes to red. So fantastic. So you can see that that is how the timer is going to be going. Now when it reaches 1 second, we're going to get an error. So 2, 1, and there we go. So we get an error, and you can see that it auto switches to the next mode. So our functionality is working very nicely. So the error that we get here is because the element has no supported sources. Now what that means is that it is trying to play the audio. Where's our audio ref? Where's the audio ref? Right here. So the time left is equal to 0. So it's trying to play this, but it's not getting it. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and check it out in the repository, or you can go ahead and download your own audio file. But in the repository, inside the assets folder, you should be able to get, where is it? Inside the public folder, you should be able to get the audio.wav file inside here. So I'm just going to get it and then drag and drop it inside here. So this is our alarm sound right here. And if you play it, then this is what you're going to hear. And a very simple alarm that is now going to play when the timer finishes. So you can just reload that, and now our page should now be working as expected, so that now we can begin to work on our settings page so that we can update our settings for our Pomodoro. So what we're going to do is, before we jump into the settings page, then the settings here, the settings component rather, is going to be taking in some properties. So the first one is going to be the modes, because we want access to the modes. And actually, you know what? We don't need access to the modes. We actually don't need that, but we need the durations. And this is equal to the durations. And then we need set durations being equal to set durations. And then we're going to have an on close here. So on close. So basically when we close the dialog, then this is going to call an inline function that is going to say set show settings. Can't type set show settings into false. So just to close it. Now we can save that, and then we can control click to go into the settings file directly. So inside the settings file, we're going to have some bit of functionality also. So right away we can go ahead and the structure here, we can get the durations, we can get set durations, and we can get on close as well. And then once we do that, we can go ahead and create our state values. What am I doing? It should be inside here. So we can go ahead and create our state values here. We can say const new durations, and set new durations is equal to use state, and this is going to be equal to a function, and this function is going to be as follows. So we're going to say object.entries. So basically we know that durations is an object, so we want to get each of those entries in that object, and this is from entries, not entries, so from entries, and then pass in object.entries, and then we're going to pass in durations, and then inside durations here we're going to map over the durations, and then inside the durations, once again, when you map over it, we want to go ahead and get the mode, and that is an array, the mode, and then the seconds. What have I typed? So mode and then seconds. And then outside of this right here, we want to say that we want to get the mode, the seconds divided by 60. And then once we have that, then we're going to say const errors and set errors is equal to use state, and it's just going to be an empty object like so. And then we're going to create a function here called handle change. So const handle change, and this function is going to be as follows. We're going to pass in the mode, and we're going to get the value as well, and we're going to say this, that const minutes is equal to a number, and then pass in the value which is coming from one of our arguments, and then we're going to say set errors into the previous errors, so prev errors like so, and then we're going to pass in an object where we're going to say dot 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 prev errors, meaning if there are any previous errors, then pass them in, and then we're going to get the mode in an array like so, and then we're going to get the mode, and the mode we're going to say that the minutes is less than or equal to 0, and if this is true, then the error that we want to show is duration must be greater than 0. And then if the minutes is already greater than 0, then we just want to render out an empty string. And then once we do that, then you can say set new durations, into the previous durations, and then we're going to go ahead and pass in this. We're going to say that this is going to be an object. We're going to spread out the duration, the previous durations like so, and then once again we're going to get the mode, and for the mode we're going to pass in the minutes. So basically getting the mode that we're currently on and then passing the minutes that we have updated it to. Okay, now once we do that, then we're going to go ahead and create another function. So right below this, we're going to create another function called handle save. So const handle save is going to be an arrow function once again, and then we're going to say this, that if the object dot values contains an error dot sum, and then we're going to pass in the error, and this should be double parentheses, so error like so. Then we want to get the error, oh my god, ARROR, or we want to get the object dot values and then pass in the new durations dot sum, then pass in the v, which is just, you know, I'm just calling it v, you can call it any other thing, and then here we're going to say that the v is less than or equal to 0. And is that correct? I'm not seeing any error, so that should be okay. Now once we do that, then we're going to go right after this. It should be this second one, and then we're going to go ahead and say this, return. So basically just break out of it. I knew there was an error. So let me see where the error is. And you know what, let me just type this out again because it seems to have confused me also. So let's say this once again. So if object dot values pass in the errors, maybe so pass in the errors dot sum, and then get the error here, then we're going to say return the error, or we're going to return object dot values pass in new durations dot sum, and then pass in v. We're going to say v is less than 0, less than or equal to 0. And then once we do that, okay, so I think I added in wait, I'm still doing something wrong here. Let me see. So if it is that, then it should be here. It should be after the if, so return. There we go. Fantastic. Now once we return, then we want to update our new duration. So we're going to say set durations. Then once again, we're going to do the same thing. So object dot from entries, then pass in object dot entries, and then we're going to say new durations dot map, and then we're going to pass in the mode, comma, minutes, and that is inside square brackets. So make sure that you get it right for the syntax. And then inside here, we're going to return once again square brackets. We're going to return the mode, and then the minutes multiplied by 60, because we have our function that is formatting it properly. Now once we do that, then right here we're going to call our onClose function. So onClose, meaning we want to now close the dialog because we have updated our function, our timer really, and then we have also clicked the handle save function. Now once we do that, then we can begin to build out our UI, and our UI is going to be as follows. We're going to say object dot entries, and then we're going to pass in new durations dot map. And you know what, when I was building this out, it looked quite nice, but then trying to show this on screen, I don't know, it feels a bit overkill to always use object dot entries, but I think it works. So if you have another solution, then please leave it down in the comments. So dot map, and then when you map over it, then we're going to pass in the mode and then the value like so, and then inside here we're going to return a div with a key equal to mode, and then mode, not mode x, and then it's going to have a class name, margin bottom of 4. Then close it out, and then inside this div we're going to return the label component from ./UI label, and then the class name here is going to be capitalize, and then the text is just going to say the mode, and then below the label we're going to have an input here, and the input is going to be a type of number. The minimum value is going to be 1. The value is going to be equal to the value which we're getting from here, and then on change, we're going to say that on change pass in our event there, and then we're going to say handle change, which is the function that we just created above, and then we're going to pass in the mode, and then e.target.value. Okay, so what that basically means is, and you know what, let's just build the function first of all, or build the UI, and then you're going to see how it's going to be, because now we're not going to be building 3 inputs, we just need 1. Okay, so let's pass in the class name here, and the margin top is going to be 1, the width is going to be full, rounded, border, gray dash 60, oh sorry, 600, and then bg dash, and this is going to say hashtag 282a36, and then padding all round of 2, and text dash white. Fantastic. And then we can close that out, and then below the input we're going to say that if the errors, and then below the input we're going to say that if errors exist on the current mode that we're on, then if this is true, then what we want to do is return a paragraph here with class name margin top of 1, text dash small, text red dash 500, and the text is going to say errors, and then pass in the current mode that we're on. Fantastic. Now we can save that, and then now look at what we have on the UI right here. So it should now update, so let's just give it a minute. So client-side exception has occurred. Do we have anything in the console? Nothing. Okay, it reloaded. Okay, fantastic. So now if you click on the settings, then you should have, so use state is not defined. Glad that is the only error. So right here, control spacebar and then enter, and we should not have anything else. So save that. So once again, let's test out the settings and input. Oh my god. Okay, so right here on the label, control spacebar, or label is already defined, so input, control spacebar from /UI input, and then once again let it reload, and let's see what we have on the screen right here. And there we go. So you can see that we have only built 1 input, but we have 3 of them right there. So not a number. Why is this showing? Okay, so this should be ampersand, double ampersand, not asterisk. There we go. So we've only typed out 1 input and 1 label, but we can see 3 inputs for each of the modes. That is because we are rendering the input depending on the modes that we have. So if I were to go ahead and add another mode here, and I didn't test this out, but it should work. So long break, and I can say exercise, for example. So exercise. If I save that, then it should update our UI inside here as well as on the toggles. So let's see right here, we can see that now we have exercise. Okay, and we don't have a value for exercise, that's why it's showing this. But then now in the settings, we should also have the value for exercise, but it doesn't update, so that doesn't work as I expected it. But you can get the gist right here, that because of all this that we're doing on top, now we can go ahead and render out 1 input and 1 label instead of having 3 inputs and then handling the value for each one of them, which can become quite a bit cumbersome sometimes. So therefore what we're going to do is, below this div, we're going to go ahead and create a button here, the button, and then close it out. And the button is simply going to say save. Now this button is going to have an on click. So on click is going to call the handle save function, handle save, and then it's going to have some class names here which are going to be dynamic, so curly brackets and then backticks, and then we're going to say margin top of 4, width of full, rounded, padding on the x of 4, padding on the y of 2, font semi-bold, and then we're going to say $ curly brackets, and we want to check that if the object.values has any errors. So if there are any errors, then we want it to be spelled out a different way. So we're going to say .sum, and then we're going to get the error inside here, and then just simply return the error. And then we're going to say that if this evaluates to true, then the classes that is going to have are as follows. So we're going to say cursor not allowed, so cursor dash not dash allowed, and then I'm going to say bg gray dash 500. And then if it evaluates to false, then we're going to say the following: the classes are going to be bg dash hashtag ff6b6b, which is our pinkish color, and then text dash black. like so, and that should be okay. And then we're also going to give it a disabled here. So disabled is going to be equal to object dot values, and then pass in the errors dot sum, get the error. And what am I doing wrong? This should be double brackets. So error, and then pass in the error like so, and that should be okay. Now I can go ahead and save that. And of course I have prettier, so it's going to format it for me very nicely. But then now, once it reloads, we should now be able to see our button working correctly, and we can change up the timer. So if we set this to 45, set the short break to 50, long break to, let's say, 120. Let's save that. And now we have the Pomodoro to 45, short break to 50, long break to 120 minutes. Now just realize something back inside the page. I didn't change this, so let's change it back to 5 minutes as default. And so there we go. So our Pomodoro is working, the short break is working, the long break is working, the start button is working, the stop button is also working, our settings are also working, and this is how it looks on a larger screen. I think it just looks better because we have just scaled it up without having to change the font sizes. So very, very nice. Now just to test it out, let's set this back to 1 minute, and then see you in a minute because I want to test out whether the audio is working. So see you in a minute because I'm just going to fast forward it once again. So now we should be able to hear the alarm sound. And there we go. I hope you heard it because I set the desktop audio to be audible. But yeah, that is going to be the end of this project. And if you want the code, just go into my repository and into my GitHub profile, and you should have a repository that is called Pomodoro, and you're going to have access to the code that we have written inside here. And of course the code in my GitHub is a bit documented. It has some portions where I left or I have in comments, so that it's going to be easy to follow along. There we go. So I have in comments inside here for you. So if you're having trouble, then simply go into my repository. The link is going to be in the description. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel as well if you're not already, and I will see you in the next one.